There's a human component in terms of network adoption. Is a technical concept, but it involves people making choices to become part of this network. Mining companies to invest money to become part of this network. Adding one node is more valuable than just that one unit than you would think. It adds an exponential richness. Remarkably collaborative. It's one of my favorite things about being a developer in the Bitcoin space, that we're all on the same mission. You need 3 touch points before you actually do anything about getting involved in Bitcoin. You hear about it, you do nothing. You hear about it, you do nothing. Maybe finally the 3rd or 4th or 10th time you get more involved. My retirement plan is Bitcoin, period. I don't have a plan B or a plan C. It's just, I'm very confident Bitcoin is going to work out. I lived my entire adult life up until a couple years ago, having no understanding what the US dollar was and how it functioned in the world, what money was. I didn't have to care.
Before we talk about open source, Bitcoin self-custody, and all the things that you're doing, give us some overview of who you are and why you're excited about Bitcoin.
Sure. My name is Keith Mukai. I'm an open source developer from Chicago in the United States. I was a career programmer, and for pretty much my entire tech career, early on, I was going after money, .coms, startups, right? Trying to get rich building the next great thing. They never worked out. I never got rich off of a VC funded startup or anything like that. All the startups I worked on flamed out. This is like the way most things go. But I just kept getting into the cycle of feeling just unfulfilled with the work I was doing. Like, as you get older, like, yeah, I want to be financially secure, but like my last, one of my last startups that I joined was doing pharmaceutical industry market research with doctors. Like, they would basically bribe a doctor to take a survey, which was really just a bribe, like literally a bribe. Like, we're going to pay you $150 to answer this 10-minute survey. But the survey was really just a marketing campaign for the drug that they were being asked about. So it was just a legal way to bribe a doctor to watch an ad, essentially. And whatever, I helped build the technology platform for it. The company did well enough. But just every day, it's like, what am I doing? Like the work is not technically interesting. It's like probably sort of negative for society in general. So I went through a bunch of years just trying to find a better way to spend my time. Actually did a major detour where I turned myself into a high school English teacher. And so I taught teenagers public high school for 2 years. And then, long story short, resigned and came back to technology. And then a few years later, I finally dug into Bitcoin. And this was it was 2017. And I'd heard about Bitcoin, for years before that. And as a programmer, it always sounded fascinating. But, the typical story, you need 3 touch points before you actually do anything about getting involved in Bitcoin. You hear about it, you do nothing. You hear about it, you do nothing. Maybe finally the 3rd or 4th or 10th time you get more involved. And it has just been this fascinating, like endless, like the rabbit holes have rabbit holes. And, even though it's been, it's 8 years now. And then the first 2 years, I didn't know anything. Like I was as noob as you can get. I made every mistake imaginable. Bought all the altcoins and lost all my money and all the value that they had in them. Took them down to 0. But once I learned more about Bitcoin, I started learning things like economics, understanding how the US dollar works in the world. And there's still a ton for me to learn. But so far, it's the only thing that I haven't gotten bored of. And it's not just technically interesting. I was just in Oslo for the Oslo Freedom Forum. And, you're directly meeting human rights activists from around the world. And there's a major component of what the HRF is doing with that conference that is all about educating and helping to build tools so the human rights activists can use Bitcoin in their work. And so, I mean, for me, Bitcoin just hits everything. Like, yes, it's my only method of savings. Like my retirement plan is Bitcoin. Period. I don't have a plan B or a plan C. It's just I'm very confident Bitcoin is going to work out. I've committed to it. Technically fascinating, and then just seeing the impact that it makes around the world, where I can't appreciate that. Like, I think Americans continue to struggle the most to appreciate what Bitcoin is and what it can do, for yourself or more importantly, just for the world. Because we are so privileged. I lived my entire adult life up until a couple of years ago, having no understanding of what the US dollar was and how it functioned in the world, what money was. I didn't have to care. But yeah, just to see the global reach and the global possibilities of this one technology, it's crazy. It's everything.
There's a lot of really interesting stuff in there. Just to close the loop, and you said you're now an open source developer. So I guess there are multiple projects that you're currently working on.
I wouldn't say currently. I started by working. When I say working, I mean contributing to as a volunteer dev. So like that's something I have to be very clear about. I started contributing to the Spectre desktop wallet in 2019, back when it was very new and there wasn't much adoption. And for the people who are newer to the space, before Sparrow wallet existed, which I think today is the most powerful, most prominent desktop software wallet, before Sparrow, Spectre desktop was the thing to use for your home cold storage, set up your own multi-sig, all of that. So I was very active contributing to Spectre desktop, and that it coincided with my interest in getting my own cold storage leveled up, wanting to start working with multi-sig, and then contributing to the wallet so that it could do more of the things that I wanted it to do. And then that has transitioned into discovering the Seed Signer project a couple of months after it started in 2021, which is also self-custody focused. And now that's become my primary focus. But anytime you're involved in the Bitcoin tech ecosystem, like the tendrils go everywhere. So like I wouldn't call myself a core developer, but I've interacted with Bitcoin Core, with those developers on certain pull requests, certain changes that people want to make in Bitcoin Core. And then Seed Signer itself relies on various other libraries, in open source libraries in the ecosystem. And so whenever I've needed a library to do something different for Seed Signer or for some other purpose, then I'll start working on that library and get those changes in.
Interesting. You said something really cool. I'm very curious about that because you said like there's so many rabbit holes. What's your most interesting rabbit hole of Bitcoin outside of Bitcoin itself that you kind of discovered so far?
I mean, the easy answer is just the econ side. Like when I was in college, I walked into college thinking I was going to be an econ major. Actually, I had never programmed before in my life as a freshman in college, and I took Econ 102 is microeconomics, and I hated it. I hated it so much that I left freshman year all depressed because I'm like, I have no idea what my major is going to be now. Like I'm totally lost. I'm not going to be an econ major. And thankfully, I found programming and turned myself into a programmer and graduated with a computer science degree. But after that first introduction to economics, I just never spent any time on it and just never understood like what the entire field was or why I should even care. But then, like I said, once I started getting into Bitcoin, I think it's, aside from the tech curiosity, to really understand why Bitcoin might be important, why it matters. Like, you have to understand the global economics side of things, at least a little bit. And like I said, I was starting at zero. And so every little bit that I would read and understand global econ a little bit better, I was like, oh my God, being a programmer and being so siloed in just the pure tech nerd world, I was just completely removed from the econ, side of things. And so for me, that was just a giant expansion of my understanding of things.
But you got Bitcoin without economics background, and you just like got the tech background, and you got to have economic knowledge with Bitcoin afterwards. You got kind of orange pit.
Yeah. I mean, it was the stickiness of the technology, right? So I said I started in 2017, and all I cared about was making money at the time. I knew nothing about it. All I knew was number go up, I should buy some. And so I rode that 2017 pump into December. And then I did everything wrong, traded out into altcoins and lost all that value into 2018, 2019. And then midway through 2019, I'm looking around at all the altcoin wreckage and then seeing Bitcoin surviving. And when I started, I was like, Bitcoin is like the boring, slow, old dinosaur coin. Like, why do people even care about this thing? And then, a year and a half later, it's the only survivor. And so I was forced to be like, okay, what is it about this thing? Why did it survive when all this other crap, went to zero? And so that kept it alive as a technology for me. And so I had to understand, okay, at least from a tech perspective, why did it survive? But then increasingly more and more of the explanations broadened out into these more like macroeconomic reasons.
It's super interesting because I hear that message a lot. Like, I'm a software developer, but I kind of got into software development and was not made for it. I even programmed at a company for like 3 years. It was I kind of got pulled out from the CEO to get the sales job in the same company, just because I didn't like the programming, and I really loved interacting with people. But still, I have a lot of contact with tech people. Some of my best friends are tech people, developers, just from school and stuff like that. And I hear from that community a lot the same thing that you're saying, like, it will be replaced by better technology. It's slow, it's boring. Like, there's nothing exciting about Bitcoin. Like all those things where I'm like, okay, there's we like that it's slow. Like, we like that it's boring. Like, it has to be predictable and all those things. But maybe as a techie, as a developer that came from that and had to learn the economic sides after that, how would you describe to tech people the bullish case for people for Bitcoin? Because I think we talk a lot about the bullish cases from like a philosophical standpoint, for human rights standpoint, for economic standpoint, but we never really talk weirdly enough about the tech side of you.
Yeah, I mean, one of my tech blind spots that prevented me from understanding or appreciating Bitcoin early on was there's a I don't want to say social component, but there's a human component in terms of network adoption, right? Like, network adoption is a technical concept, but it involves people making choices to become part of this network, right? Mining companies to invest money to become part of this network. And so for me as a programmer, and I don't have a background in network engineering, right? Like networking layers, right? So that's as far away as you can get to my side of the, like, within the tech world, we are very segmented and isolated from each other, right? Like, I don't understand how networking works at all. But so that was one of my blind spots that yeah, like you said, I'm looking at transactions per second, the speed of the thing, all that. I'm like, yeah, like it's just an upgrade waiting to happen. And not being able to wrap my brain around the power of network adoption and what that means. That each person who chooses to join the network, right? They're making an active choice, whether it's out of desire or it's out of economic interest. If you're a miner investing to build, a new Bitcoin mine, each decision to join that network is obviously adding to that network's power, and it's an exponential web, right? Like I forget, there's some like law for the size of a network, and it's exponential, growth and power.
I know. I will keep talking. I might think about it.
See, this is one problem. All these economic laws have pushed out the other laws on the tech side in my brain. But I think for somebody who's just trained as a non-network programmer, it's just hard to grasp what that network adoption power really means. And so, yeah, I was like, oh, well, if something's better, then, we'll just move to it, right? That's logical. But not really understanding the inertia of this massive network is currently sitting, the Schelling point of Bitcoin, right? That like, yeah, I can go out and design the next great, algorithm or whatever, but until I get enough people to move with me, I'm just one guy like shouting in the void, doing nothing, right? I've accomplished nothing. But I think it's really hard for nerds to grasp that there is this human decision point of joining the network that really influences, the power of something like this.
Do you mean Metcalfe's law? Sorry to.
Yes, that sounds right.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, like as a network grows, the interconnectivity, because it's exponential, is adding one node is more valuable than just that one unit than you would think. It adds an exponential richness and depth to the network. And also, even for a tech person, I don't think we have any real analogies to appreciate what decentralization really means. Like I've always struggled to explain this to non-Bitcoiners. Because it's already confusing that an outsider, they're like, well, so who runs Bitcoin? Or like, my older relatives, I'm like, oh, so you work for Bitcoin, because they just think it's a company, right? Like, yeah, I'm Keith at bitcoin.com, right? But even on the tech side, at least for my generation of programmer, it's just, like I'm old enough that things like, Napster and, file sharing networks were on the rise. But just to really grasp the power of decentralization, it just takes time. It just takes exposure. And it's not something that I was ever taught in my computer science courses. So again, it was just a big blind spot on the tech side that I just couldn't appreciate until I spent more time digging into it.
It's something that I actually think a lot about when we move forward with the technical innovation, with AI, with all the developments, where everything is just copy and paste. And I'm fascinated by how easy it is now for me to copy myself. Like I wanted to make because there's like some MiCA laws and like weird stuff going on at the end of the podcast, that I want to just like have a small disclaimer, saying like, hey, this is not financial advice and all those things. And I did not really want to say it myself. So I was like, hey, I'll just clone my voice and let it AI say it. And I was like, oh shit, that's really good.
This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.
Like that's how I speak, because Riverside has that, and Riverside has like, I don't know, 600 hours of me speaking.
Yeah.
So it has a good data set, and then I clone my voice, and I'm like, that really sounds like me. And now I just used the AI voice. I don't know if this podcast already has it, but probably has it. Like at the very end of the podcast, when everything is out and done, there's like a 5-second Robin AI speaking that this is not financial advice and all those things. Where we come to a point where like you cannot be sure about anything except Bitcoin. Like that's like the decentralized thing that's verifiable. That's like digital squares and all those things, and that's the only thing that you can really prove and verify in the digital world. What's the worth of that? Like, that's kind of amazing to me.
Yeah. I mean, my mom last week sent me a link to an article about the next version of the car that she has that she was really excited about. It's like, oh, look how great this is. And I click on the link. I'm like, Mom, that's an AI video. That car doesn't exist. And she was like, what? Why would somebody do that? Like, I don't know, to get clicks so that people share it like you just did. You know, it's like, that's terrible. Like, sorry, Mom, that's the world we live in right now.
Very true. Yeah, it's very hard to figure out what's real and what's not real. Is it just a side question? Because I think as a tech person, you always look at tech and you're like, okay, what can I improve on that? Is there anything that you're like, this can actually be improved on Bitcoin, just on a technical side, or is there something that you're like, okay, we kind of have to think about that?
So I'm way overdue to look into things like check, template, verify, some of these big proposed changes to the protocol. For my role as a developer on Seed Signer, we rely on these other libraries from the Bitcoin ecosystem. And, to be totally transparent, like those libraries do like the hard work of the cryptography and the Bitcoin operations and all that. And so in an exaggerated way, I'm kind of a glorified UX assembler, right? So all the hard pieces are done for me. I'm just making a logical step 1, step 2, step 3 experience for a user. And so I'm not as deep on the protocol level proposals as I'd like to be. I mean, just for my own curiosity, I want to spend time and understand them. But even once I understand them, I don't think I would ever have the expertise to, weigh in and be like, damn it, we need, check sig from stack right now. Like, I don't know. Zooming out from that deep level of technology, I mean, one thing that we've really focused on the Seed Signer project is user experience. And, for a self-custody tool, it's so important to not make mistakes, right? I mean, this is like your life savings. And there are certain complicated decision points that you can't just like magically wipe away and hide from the user. I mean, you could, but if you did that, then the user is going in a little bit ignorant. And if they don't fully understand the parameters of what they're setting up, it's just, you're creating like dangerous holes in their own knowledge that could come back and totally screw them, later. And so we're always agonizing over how many of these confusing things do we have to show the user? And of the ones that we have to show, how can we explain it? How can we guide the user through this process? And by the way, the default build for a Seed Signer, is this. So we have like a 1.3-inch screen to explain to you the most important aspects of your life savings, right? So it's really hard. And it's not a solved problem. I mean, it's a little bit of a cop-out answer. I think there are protocol changes that will need to happen for Bitcoin. Right now, I'm very comfortable that debate is happening in more capable hands than mine. But no matter what, Bitcoin is still too hard to use. And the tools have gotten better and better and better, but we still have a long way to go. And then every new advance creates even harder usability challenges. Like there's a generation of wallet software doing things like Miniscript and fallback spending conditions, and like they're really powerful and they solve a lot of great problems, but it's increased complexity. And you're at the point where it's like I almost have to present the user with something that looks like code, that's full of like if else cases. If this spending condition is true, then here's how you sign a transaction. But otherwise, if this much time has passed, then blah blah blah. And even if that's written in human friendly language, it just becomes overwhelming to be like, okay, wait, which if case am I in? How does this work? What's going to happen? So it's unsolved problem.
So the focus should be more on the outside ecosystem of Bitcoin when it comes to technical advancements, and not the core Bitcoin protocol, and making the whole experience, the ecosystem, easier and better.
Well, we always need an all of the above approach, and I think one thing that people from the outside who aren't technical, aren't working on code, it might be hard to appreciate, but the Bitcoin technical community, so from someone like me working on a hardware signing device, to the software wallet devs, to the core devs working on the protocol, it's all incredibly collaborative, remarkably collaborative. It's one of my favorite things about being a developer in the Bitcoin space, that we're all on the same mission. And so I reject the way you formulated the question of, do we do this or do we do that? Like, no, we have to do both. And the great thing is, I think I'm really good at one, and I'm totally unqualified for the other, right? But then, like the core devs who are really leading the charge on these possible big protocol changes, probably they suck at making a UI that a regular person can understand, right? Probably they suck at even explaining what the change is that they're trying to make for Bitcoin and what its advantages are. They can explain it to other devs, but they can't explain it to, like your broader audience. So we need everyone. We need you presenting these concepts and explaining these and bringing, people to communicate these things to everyone. We need me building UX. We need them working protocol. Everywhere, everyone's working together.
Which brings me actually to a very interesting topic. How do I formulate that? It's if you have a protocol in Bitcoin which is in itself hard to understand on a technical side, but also like game theory and the economic side of it, and you in general don't have a lot of people that understand Bitcoin, like just in general, maybe, I don't know, a rough understanding of Bitcoin, how many people are there that really understand it? I don't know, 500,000, 200,000, like really hard to guess. And then of those people, how many people are actually understanding the technical implementations? How many people understand what's going on with Bitcoin Core, knots, and all those things? Then you come to this thing of like, there are not a lot of people that actually understand and can argue on the technical side, why we need this or why we need that. Where I'm like, there's some danger to having a small group of people being the experts and moving the needle, because not a lot of people can actually weigh in. But then we also need a lot of people to run nodes and take decisions, because we've seen in the block size war how important this is for people to take a stance and actually understand what's going on. So it's really interesting, and I feel like we have like a few more discussions to come. Like, what if with like quantum computing, and we need to like upgrade something? What if we cannot agree on something? Like, what if we are so divided and like we just cannot agree on, like, so Bitcoin Core and like this protocol? I think it's really interesting, and I feel like I should weigh in heavier, but I just don't feel qualified to do that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the scary thing is, if you took like the 200 most technical people in the Bitcoin space and set off a bomb in that room, let's not do this, but just theoretically speaking, right? It would only take about, I'm just guessing here, 200 people. Like, you would severely cripple Bitcoin development for, a decade, right? Like, I think that's how small the universe is of people who are technical enough to really understand what's happening and make changes. So we're talking small number of core devs, a handful of, every Bitcoin ecosystem project you can find, whether it's a company producing a retail hardware wallet, a software team producing a software wallet, whatever it is, everyone is a small team, right? So if you just took the technical leaders of, the 2 or 3, maybe 4 from each group, put them in that room, nuked them all, right? Like, our entire industry is paralyzed. That's how small we are. I think Bitcoin would survive, but it would be like, I don't know, a sports analogy, like your baseball farm team, right? The what do they call it? The minor leagues, right? So the major leagues have been decimated. The minor leagues have been decimated. You've got no farm team. You've got like no college prospects to draft. You got to take this like generation of 8-year-old kids and grow them into the next generation of professional baseball players. Like that's what it would take to like rebuild from, a loss like that. So that's scary. But yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought. But yeah, we need more.
Yeah, and it's also, that's the reason why why in big companies the executives fly in different planes and all those things, which have some merit to it. In America, as you're coming from there, there's like a designated survivor. I don't know if there's a real thing or I just saw it on a series.
Right.
Like maybe it's just a series, but like there are things like that in place for that, and it's really interesting. I don't know. It's the first digital, truly decentralized project, and we just don't know what the future brings. I just know right now it's the best thing we have for money. That's why I'm all in. And it's really interesting to see this whole thing shake out because we truly like have never, we don't have a comparison to it. We don't have something to like, oh, like it is like that. And there are people that compare it to the printing press. Like, I get it, but how is it? like it's so different. Then people are like, oh, it's like the electric telegraph. Like, how? Oh, it's like the internet. Like, no. Like, oh, you cannot really make any comparisons to it, and you can make a lot of comparisons to it. So it's a really interesting kind of place to be in, and that's why I guess it's. And you mentioned it before of like there are so many different rabbit holes, and you still don't get bored. I interviewed now over 500 different guests, and I'm still not bored with the Bitcoin crowd.
Yeah. No. Okay. Actually, and I did remember the train of thought. You had mentioned, that you feel like you should be digging in deeper into some of these more, technical protocol discussions. Yeah, I think it's amazing that you've done these 500 plus interviews, and I said it's a team effort. Like, again, I'm pretty confident just knowing programmer nerds like I do, right? Like in general, we just really suck as communicators. Like, the typical thing is you ask a really technical person a question and you have no idea what the answer makes no sense at all. And you're like, wait, can you dumb it down? I'm like, oh, okay. And then their second attempt is still like they overshot the mark so far. I'm like, wait, okay. You got to dumb it down even further. Like, you don't understand, like you're trying to explain this to an ant. Okay. Like, come all the way down to my level here, please. And a lot of people they can't do it. Right. They're like, I've had these times where, I'm deep into solving a problem for days and days and days. And then, my phone rings and it's, a person from my normal life. And like, I can't I can't even communicate like a human being, because my brain has been like so laser focused in this like incredibly deep, niche, complicated thing that like I don't have any brain power left to back my way out. It's like I'm a deep sea diver, right? Like I dove all the way to the bottom of the ocean, and now somebody's like at the boat tugging on my line saying, "Hey Keith, come up for a conversation." I'm like, I can't get back there. Right. But yeah, I mean, I think there's incredible value for podcasters, interviewers, right? To like, let's say you do an interview with one of these really technical people and it's a horrible disaster. They can't communicate at all. Like, well, we tried, that sucked. And then you do the next one and like, oh damn, that guy was actually pretty good. Or I actually, leveled up X% by having that conversation. And so then the communicator cream of the crop starts to emerge. And so when the next technical topic comes up, you're like, hey, I'm going to reach out to that person because they did a great job explaining it at the proper level. And so we just need so many of these like translators, people who are deep enough on the tech side to understand what does check sig from stack mean? What is check template verify and why should I care? But they can then explain it and have enough of a relationship with them where you're willing to accept their assessment of, okay, what's the value versus the risks, right? Like maybe it's too technical for you or I to ever feel confident about, making a definitive call. Like, yes, it's fine. There's no risk or whatever, but just we develop trust in some of these people who are really good at explaining it. I'm like, well, hell, if this person feels pretty good about it, I can never get to 100%, but that gets me a long, a good way the way there.
Interesting. It's so important, those translators, as you said, yeah. And I've experienced it a lot. And I guess we all have like different strength, and it's like a team effort. I like that way of looking a lot. Why did you focus on like open source? Like how was you came from the tech world? You started with the startups that kind of got burned, but like how did you end up with like the love for open source?
I think from the tech side, I love the accessibility of it. That everything is there; it's out in the open. I can take the code. I can do whatever I want with it. Like simple example, as a younger developer, you always struggle to like solve problems, right? Because you're just inexperienced. You don't know what approaches to take. And I'd be using somebody else's library and I'd run into a problem and I would search the documentation and the instructions and I couldn't find an explanation. And I'd be like, oh no, I don't know what to do now. It's not working the way I thought it would. And then it took me a while to realize like this library I'm using is open source. Like I don't have to rely on the documentation. I can literally just go look at the code and try to understand what is causing this failure, whether it's my fault or it's the library's fault. And at first I was super intimidated. Like I did not consider myself a strong enough programmer to just dive into a, tens of thousands of lines of somebody else's code and understand what they were doing. But just as I got more experienced, as I dove into more and more of these open source libraries, I just gained a lot more confidence. And now it's just like, oh man, and I've ended up contributing to a lot of other libraries because of this, right? Where I've looked at the code, I'm like, oh, it's not exactly my fault, but this library could do this a little bit better, or it could serve my use case if we just add an else condition here, right? Give me a branch, give me a choice. And so I code that in and I submit it as a pull request and it gets added to that library. And now my problem is solved. And I love that I've just solved a problem for everyone else who comes after me. Now, maybe I have such a niche use case that almost nobody's going to care, but I've created that option, right? I've made this library richer and more powerful. And then working on Seed Signer. So it's just an open source project. There's no company. There's no profit. We're all volunteer developers. Even when I started in 2021, I didn't have the same level of appreciation for open source software that I do now. It's grown with this project. And one of the biggest things was, as I got more involved, I became more and more, not the face of the project, but the lead developer. So I would go to conferences, be on panels, give talks, do workshops, whatever. And I loved that when I show up at a conference and I give a talk, I'm not trying to sell you anything, right? I'm just sharing the work that I'm really proud of, that I think is really powerful and really useful. And if you find that interesting, amazing. You get to go, download the code yourself, build a seed signer yourself. Like, you don't have to go through me. You don't have to pay me a license. There's no, product that you have to buy from a company. And just that open source vibe is just something I never fully appreciated until the years of working on Seed Signer. That, like, my incentive, like, I can create a story that says, like, oh, here's how I benefit personally from working on this project and talking about it. Like, for sure, I've gotten open source funding grants, right? Like, I'm literally living off of sats that HRF gave me to support the work on Seed Signer. I'm going to the conference in Riga, and I don't have to pay for a ticket to go to the conference because I'm going to be on a panel, right? So I get the conference ticket comped. So there are benefits, but I can honestly say to somebody, like, I'm not doing this to profit off of it. I'm not trying to get something out of you. I'm not trying to convince you to hand over your sats to me so that I can profit from this work. I'm working on it because it's fun, because I'm proud of it, because I use it myself, because I think it's useful to people around the world. And I think over time, more and more people in the world are going to use it. The thrill that I get, like, I'm sitting at my breakfast table in Chicago, Illinois. This is literally where I've done almost all of my Seed Signer coding, right? And, like, I've never been a very, like, I'm an ignorant American, right? Let's just be fully honest, right? When I went to Oslo, I had to look on Google Maps, where is Oslo, right? When I booked my flight to Riga, I had to look, what country is Riga in? Because I did not know, all right? But it's just so cool that the code that I've written while sitting at this table is being used by people all around the world. And they're finding it useful. They're finding it powerful. They're finding it empowering. And I just, like, that's amazing. If this was a for-profit company, we wouldn't be investing marketing dollars in, name your country, right? Because it's not a big enough market for us. But instead, as an open source project, we had two guys from Spain who asked, hey, is adding Catalan language support on your roadmap? I was like, okay, two things. Roadmap. We don't really have a roadmap. We're a bunch of volunteers building the features that we want to see on this project. Two, what's Catalan? I've never heard of that before. I didn't know it was a language. And so I told them, guys, everything's open source. If you want to translate Seed Signer into Catalan, here's the link. Go do it. And in 24 hours, they did it. They were done. And so a couple of weeks ago, with our next release, Catalan is one of the 8 languages we added, or 7 languages I think we added to Seed Signer. Right? So it's like French to cover a third of Africa, Chinese to cover 1.3 billion people, Japanese, Korean, German, Italian, Catalan.
How many people speak this language? Do you know that?
I think it's like, I want to say 6 million, but that might be too high. It might be way smaller than that.
I mean, it's a community within Spain, right? So, like, it has to be like less people than Spain.
Yeah. Actually, my number's probably way off then.
I've no clue. Also, I'm from Europe, and I also don't know that much about it. I know roughly where it is, but like no history at all. It when you describe it, it almost sounds like a work of an artist. Honestly, like you like it's like this connection between like open source developers is like almost like artist work.
That's too I don't know, grandiose an analogy for my taste. I always shy away from like I really take stay humble stack sats to heart, right? Like I don't think there's enough humility in the space. Like before we started recording, you know, I told you like there are plenty of things in the Bitcoin space that I'm not an expert on, and even though I have opinions, like I have no business sharing them because like I'm just a dumbass like everyone else on these other topics. Like, you know, my any sense of like authority I might have in my role as a developer should have zero halo effect for me to then weigh in on other topics that are kind of outside of my domain. But anyway, so yeah, so calling it artistry is it's I don't know, not it's too immodest. But I would say it's just back to the idea of teamwork. It's incredible teamwork, and open source not just facilitates teamwork. I mean, it's predicated on teamwork. It relies on teamwork. There is no open source community if there is no teamwork. That's the whole point, that anybody can come in from the middle of nowhere and start contributing valuable, you know, new features and improvements and bug fixes, whatever else. And like my background in high school, I was on my high school gymnastics team, which is actually that's a better analogy, where it's an individual sport, right? Like football, basketball, you're like head to head with your opponent. Sometimes they're bigger than you, stronger than you, more talented, whatever, and you lose. But gymnastics it's just you. Like if something went wrong, it's your fault. You know, you screwed up, you weren't good enough. But it's also a team sport. Like, you know, for example, on an event, you would put up 3 competitors and all 3 scores count. And the way you build your lineup is you want your strongest guy to go last. And so you're kind of like building momentum, right? As these competitors go. But the early guys have a responsibility to do well because you want your teammates to see success so that they are then like juiced and inspired to then be successful when it's their turn to go. But so there's this team dynamic for this individual sport. And I think open source development is very much like that, where we can be very isolated. Like I'm alone. It's just me and my dog, right? And most days, like, sure, I communicate over Telegram, but you know, it was a joy to meet some of my co-contributors in person years after we had been working together on this project. And so it's a very individual activity, but then we all come together and collaborate as a team. So like, you know, I say I'm the lead developer of Seyr, but intentionally, I have no privileges in our GitHub repository. And so I cannot push a change into Seyr myself. The only thing I can do is write a pull request, which is just, here's my collection of changes that I'd like to make. And then other volunteers have to review it. And it's up to them to decide to accept my change. So I'm the most prolific contributor, but I have no authority beyond the next random person that comes in out of nowhere. Right. I mean, certainly I have reputation and trust, you know, built over the years. But I just love to be able to say, like, I'm not, I have no extra privileges, right? Like, and I've had changes I proposed that the other developers were like, it's not quite a good fit for what we're doing. And they've rejected it. Right. So like they say no to me all the time. they tell me I'm wrong. Right?
The first time I ever made any money, I got myself from that money a watch. And ever since then, I collect timepieces to remember times where I achieved some milestone. That's why I got the Bitcoin 2025 edition when I went to my first ever American Bitcoin conference. So for me, the Bitcoin watches from CoinVigilante represents the time that we are living in. For every person that wears a Bitcoin watch, I know they are representing sound money to the outside world. Make sure to check out those amazing CoinVigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. I know how big of a hurdle it can be to have self-custody, but it's so freaking important to make that first step. We have to make sure it's as easy and simple as possible. And that's exactly what BitBox did. BitBox created the simplest and the easiest hardware wallet to use to get into self-custody. So get yourself a BitBox down from the link in the description. And when you use code Robin, you even get a 5% discount. The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They're also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called Microseed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With Microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because Microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. And we have right now a summer sale going on for 15% off. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today for $186. And you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. Again, that's microseed.io to get your last backup tool you ever need. It's like, why are you telling me that I'm wrong? It's an interesting thing, yeah. The company I worked with, there was like a clear CTO and there's like the structures, the sprint meetings and like, you know, about all of that. Yeah. And I love the comparison actually, because my main sport I did in my life, I tried all of it, but like my main sport that I was really good at and I like did it for a long time, even like on national level in Austria, and was quite good at was swimming. I mean, like I'm huge. It makes sense. And swimming at its core is an individual sport. There's relay swimming where like one guy swims and then the next one starts, but that's kind of just like adding 4 people together that made an individual sport. It's not really a team sport in that sense. And the one thing that you said, I love it so much because that's why I love swimming also so much. If you were not as fast as your opponent, there's no referee that you can point to. Like in soccer, we always have like, oh, like the referee made that decision and that's why we lost the game.
Right. Yeah.
In swimming, there's not such a thing. If you've lost, it was your mistake. You were not fast enough. I really like that analogy because it shows the individual self-responsibility. And that's why I like those sports where like, yeah, you either did a good job or not a bad job. There's no discussion. But I guess that's why soccer is so popular because there are a lot of discussions happening. Like, oh, he did that. Like that was not a handball. The hand was not like that. Like, and the rules are so vague that like you can make an argument in all directions. I love swimming as a sport because it's so clean. You're like, you either did good or not. You start there, like, how fast were you at those in the water?
Yeah. I mean, I think the difference is sports like swimming and gymnastics, it's all like the personal challenge. It's up to like your fortitude, your willingness to stick through all the hard practices, all the hard training, right? The onus is all on you. And either you perform at the end of the day or you don't. But then as a spectator, the interactive chaos and occasional genius of team sports, of football, of American football, of basketball, right? Like, as a spectator, that's when things get really exciting because it's so interactive and unpredictable, and like there are no surprises in a gymnastics routine. The coach is never like, oh, holy cow, he went for the whatever. It's like, no. We know exactly what you're doing. And if you deviate, your coach is going to, yell at you after the routine. But, on the pitch, it's just like, holy cow, did you see that like amazing, dodge or, whatever it was? That it's just, I mean, for the audience, it's way more fun. But yeah, the personal challenge of training for those individual endeavors is, and obviously not that football training is easy, but that it's as you said, like, you put in the work and you see the result, and there is no but. Whereas like on the football pitch, I could train my butt off as hard as I can, but I just come across somebody who's more talented than I am, and they get right past me, right? So then, okay, I did everything I could, but I still couldn't, level up my skill to block them, whatever. But yeah, swimming, you put in the effort and you shave off the milliseconds and you see the result.
I mean, there is a huge component to swimming if you're not having the body. I always make the comparison between male and female because I was at the time, at my peak, I was kind of like under the top 10 in my age group in Austria. If I would have been a female, I would have swam in the Olympics.
Right.
But as a male, I didn't. And swimming is a great sport, but it definitely isn't fair. If you're like 2 meters tall and you have a great body, you just have to train really hard to get the technique done. But everyone can do that if they train really hard. And no 1 meter 60 guy will ever catch you because you're just so much taller. You have like you come earlier to where you have to turn around to swim back again, and you are fast. Like, there's so many advantages to that. But yeah, like that's a whole different topic now.
Well, and we met in person in El Salvador, and the swimming background makes sense now, because when I met you, I was like, this guy is tall, because I'm very short. So actually, if we're being realistic, I should be like this on screen. Yeah. Oh, you got muted when you stood up.
Oh, sorry.
There we go.
I was. This is probably the one thing that I hear the most when I go to conferences. Oh shit, you are way taller than I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, because you only see me like that big.
Right.
I have an interesting one. Do you think open source will gain more momentum and will kind of like gain more and more popularity? We see it now with Nostra. We see with like other projects. By the way, a small note here. Because I had a little bit of coding background, I was like, hey, I want to tinker around with Nostra, and I just copied on my local host Primal, and I had it up and running within 5 minutes. And I was like, oh shit, like that's super easy. That was smooth. And this is what I love about open source, because it's just like copy a thing, and I'm like, oh, what if I do this? Oh, I broke it. And all those things, but like it's super collaborative. You're like, oh, I copied that. I just got started with coding on Primal for like you can get started in 10 minutes, even if you don't. Like if you don't know what you're doing and you probably need like 20 minutes maybe with like ChatGPT, and maybe like you have to jump through some hurdles. But honestly, it's super freaking easy, and it kind of brings down the thing. So my question kind of is like, do you think open source has more of a market share when it comes to what consumers are using?
Yeah, I mean, undeniably. I'm old enough that I grew up in the era where Windows was in complete domination of the world, and Windows has always sucked. Every version of Windows has always sucked, and it's just like a crime that it's been, by far the most popular, desktop operating system for all these decades. But then, and I don't know the full history, but over time, Linux, open source operating system, has grown and grown in popularity and power, and those open source tendrils, that I said, have been reaching out further and further, to the point where I don't know how long it's been, maybe 15 years ago, Apple decided to adopt Linux, and so Mac OS is Linux under the hood with a really pretty Apple skin as the user interface. But like, my MacBook that I'm using right now is running Linux. And I mean, it's like an Apple fork, an Apple flavor of Linux. But so Apple just fully capitulated and said, hey, this open source operating system is better than what we've been building for the last however many decades. Let's adopt it. And somehow Windows is still doing its thing, but but even they have added an ability to run Linux within Windows, which is the only way that I use Windows now. But yeah, so like, quick example of the power of open source. So I'm working on a next generation seed signer that uses a very different approach to hardware and technology and whatever else. The nerd details don't matter. All that matters is that there's a lot of hard problems that I don't know how to solve yet, and I'm kind of struggling my way through it. But I needed to be able to decode QR codes in software, right? I needed code that could take an image and find a QR code and extract the data from it. So there's an open source library that does that. I grabbed it, and then I needed help to have that library talk to the code that I was using. And so there's another open source project that had already done most of that work. And so I used their connector to help me get started. And then once I got that working, I found that the performance was terrible. So I'm like, okay, I just put in all this effort to get this working, and the end result is it's unusable. So then I started looking back at that library that was doing the QR decoding, and they had made some optional speed enhancements for certain platforms. And so I looked into how to activate them, and they had documented everything. But it's just, I'm coming from such an incredible level of ignorance that, I didn't understand what I was reading the first time I read it, right? And so only now, weeks later, I'm like, oh, that's how you turn this thing on. And so I turned it on. I was like, oh my God, it's 6 times faster. This is so much better. And then I shared that with the person who created that connector library. And he was like, oh, my performance is actually really bad. Can you show me how you did that? Right. And so I gave him my code to turn on that speed up. He turned it on. He's like, oh my God, I'm seeing the same result. Right. So just there's this ongoing self-reinforcing cycle of open source improving open source that we're relying on this QR decoding package. I'm relying on this guy to write the glue connector for me. but then I can go back and figure out how to, enhance things that then benefits the middle guy's project too. And then, so now that we've got the 6x increase, it's still a little too slow. And so I have it as a longer term goal to go deeper into this QRG coding package. And this is getting way further from my area of comfort. It's in the C programming language, which I learned in 1997 and never used professionally. So this is not where I'm strong. But I think maybe if I spend enough time in there, I could find some further speed ups, and then I can contribute those changes into that QRG coding library itself. And then everyone who's using that library would benefit from the speed ups if I can find any. But so that's a long way of saying, yes, open source is going to win, because if we were a company, we would only have so many resources to throw at this particular problem. And instead, in the open source world, we have all these people with different interests and different expertise contributing. And they're, as a whole, as a collective, they create a team that's much bigger and more talented than any one company could ever assemble.
Open systems is just then that much more powerful than a closed system ever can be. I love that. It's a really good explanation, like why open systems kind of absorb the closed system over time. I'm curious if that the same thing, like there's so many avenues to go down, but like because most of the consumer tech now is closed source. Like most of it is kind of the gardens, and then they want to close the gardens. They don't want to let anyone in. But I see more and more open source, and I mean, Bitcoin is kind of the open sourcing of money in a broader sense, because all the banking software is closed sourced. At least I don't know any bank that open sources their softwares.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin is kind of the open source version of that. And I like that it's the default option now for most Bitcoin companies, not all of them, but for most of them, to be open source. And that's already, I think, a great transparency is so powerful. If we have transparency in all of it, like I'm all for that. Yeah. We have one question that I asked each and every one of my guests, and the question is, what can we learn from you besides Bitcoin? We talked a lot about other things, but maybe there's something else we can learn from you.
Ooh, interesting. I think given the audience is Bitcoiners, I would just go back to just the role of being humble, being a team player. Going back to the gymnastics world. So I currently also coach high school gymnastics during the 2.5 month season that the kids are in the school season for. And I think I'm an extremely good gymnastics coach for high school kids. It's kind of a unique skill set to have, but I'm not the head coach, and I'm totally okay with that. Like, I don't need to be the top man in the hierarchy. I don't have any problem with stating my opinion, but then if the head coach disagrees, it's his call, right? Like, I understand my role is to advocate for the things that I feel strongly about as being the best way to go. But I've accepted this role as an assistant coach that is, I'm not the top guy. If I wanted to get a head coaching job, I could, right? There's actually a big need for more head coaches in this competitive league. But I really enjoy my role as an assistant coach, where I can focus on, the skills and the specific gymnasts that are the best fit for what I have to offer. And I don't have to deal with all the other crap that the head coach has to deal with. And I think a lot of, a lot of young men, for sure, in particular, like would probably struggle to understand that, right? Like if you can go out and be the top dog, go be the top dog. What's wrong with you? Stop being a beta male, you know, like, um, but I between humility and just really loving the idea of teamwork, I just think that's huge, and that's been the vibe that we've worked really hard to bring into the Seed Signer project, where, you know, again, I'm the most influential voice when it comes to, you know, technical discussions and features and directions. But like I said, I have no authority, right? Like I'm just a strong voice in the room. And when other people disagree with me, like it doesn't hurt my ego, right? I'm not like, how dare you? I am Keith Mukai. You must do what I want us to do. Get on board or get out. No, it's just like, you know, you hear their reasoning. Maybe we have different core priorities, but it's like, okay, that's fair. And you know, like there's always like Bitcoiner Twitter drama going on because everyone wants to have a hot take. Everyone wants to get, you know, some spicy take that gets a lot of attention. Like, I don't want any of that. You know, like having a spicy take means that like half of Bitcoin Twitter hates you now and wants to yell at you and call you a retard, right? Like that's not fun. You know, my ego doesn't need like, I don't know. Like I just think if people can find the joy of being productive, of contributing to the space, you know, being useful, without letting their ego get in the way, without having to be the most important person in the room. Like I really wanted to go to this conference in Riga, and I got the contact info for one of the organizers. And it took me like 3 days to email them because I was basically like, in my mind, I want to go to this conference. I'm going to spend a lot of money to get there, but I'm only going to go if I get the free speaker's ticket. And they didn't reach out to me to invite me. So I'm like, I'm writing this email to invite myself to be a speaker so that they give me a free ticket. You know, it just felt so like tacky. But so I finally, you know, hit send on the email, and they wrote back immediately. They're like, "Oh, that'd be great. We're so excited." I'm like, "Okay, cool." You know, but there's a moment I'm like, I'm just gonna feel like an asshole, you know, if I'm trying to invite myself to their party and they don't know who the hell I am or they don't care. You know, if they're just like, cool, bro, no thanks, stay home. You know? But yeah, just that it's, I don't know, the humility, like, and so there's a part of me that like feels a horrible irony right now. I feel like I'm bragging about being humble. So I recognize the awkwardness here. But I'm just saying, like, it's just something that I really value. Also because in the moments when I'm not humble, more often than not, I just end up feeling like an ass. You know, like if you're like out there having like a bold take about something and you're a little bit wrong, it's just really embarrassing. You know, so like I don't need to like throw bombs out there and then have somebody like throw a gotcha at me. So yeah, just I don't know, build stuff, be useful, and be part of the team. That's we're all gonna win if we can just do that to the best of our abilities. We're all gonna win.
I had a story that you probably relate to a lot. I have to reach out to all my guests. Like I do reach out to all of them, but I try to figure out a point where it makes a natural fit. So I've never reached out, like Michael Seyr, I only reached out because he followed me on Twitter. And I was like, that's a good sign. Like if he goes ahead and follows me on Twitter, I'm allowed, there's a natural point that I can ask him. If he wouldn't have done that, I would never have asked him. Same with Jeff Booth. He followed me on Twitter. I asked him on the same and on that very day. Jack Mullers, I never had that interaction. And there was this one party in Amsterdam where I was invited as a speaker. Also, funny story. I was asking selflessly for a press pass because I also did not want to pay for the ticket. And they're like, "Hey, we don't want to give you a press pass, but we would love to have you as a speaker on the main stage." And I'm like, "That sounds
even better."
That sounds even better. But anyways, we are at that party, and like I am very 90% of the people might not believe me right now, but I'm very introverted. Like I don't want to speak with people first. Like that's why I love to have the podcast, because everyone on the conference comes to me like, "Hey, you're Robin." I really like that situation, because then I don't have to open the conversation. Like, and I just don't speak with people that like, don't open the conversation. It's weird for me. Like, "Oh, hi, I'm Robin. I'm introducing myself," even though you did not ask for it.
Right.
But anyways, Jack Mallers was also there, and there's like two people like, "Oh, you have to get Jack Mallers on. You have to get Jack Mallers on." I'm like, nah. Like, I don't want to go there. But someone was like so like pulling me, and he just pulled me like, "Hey, we have to go to Jack Mallers now." And he's like, "Hey, Jack Mallers, here's Robin. You should be on his." And I felt so ashamed and bad in that very moment. And the funny thing is, Jack Mallers saw me, and he's like, "Dude, you had such a nice Michael Seyr interview." So he knew me, which was completely fascinating for me. And so there's a lot of awkwardness with like asking for things, even if you know it's a good mix. Like even if you know, like, of course, like he's a Bitcoin speaker, I'm a Bitcoin podcast host. Like I guess like we should like have a conversation. It's like very natural for it. And it's still hard for me to ask for things. But I realized as a podcast host, relying to be on stages, relying to do that, like I kind of have to do it. But I'm always out of my comfort zone. I'm always like, this is absolutely not my strong suit. I just love sitting down with Bitcoiners, and this podcast just blew up, and like, okay, I'm the podcast host, and I would love to speak with Lynn Alden. I've never invited her. Everyone tells me, "Oh, she's so easy. She will come on your show." And I'm like, I don't know. we haven't had that natural touching point. Like that sounded weird. We haven't had the touch point of like where I feel good to contact her.
Yeah, I get it. I've been in the same space as Lynn Alden, a handful of times, and I really appreciate her work. Really appreciate her writing. But I've realized, like, I would love to shake her hand and say, "Thank you for all your work," and I'm sure she would appreciate it. But then I'm like, and then I'm done. Like, it's nice to like thank someone for their work, but like I felt, I need something else, right? Like it's just awkward to be like, "Hey, you're great. Okay, bye." Like I need a reason to have a conversation with her. And I've always shied away. I'm like, "That's Lynn Alden." Okay, I'm walking away.
I'm weirdly enough very much like that. It is challenging as a podcast host.
Yeah. But it's great that you had that person being the facilitator, dragging you over to Jack to say, "Hey, you guys need to talk." I consider myself more outgoing than I expected to be. Like if high school Keith met me now, he'd be astonished that I'm more outgoing and sociable than you would have thought. But I've really liked, there've been a couple instances where a Bitcoiner, has felt a little like lost at a social event, or they're there for a goal. Like, "Oh, I'm here to like meet people," or, "Oh, I'm here to like generate funding for my organization, but like, I don't have the contacts. I don't know. I don't have the introductions." And then when I hear that, like, I'll grab them. I'm like, well, have you, met and talked to this person? And like, no. And I'm like, oh, well, I know them. Let's go say hi. Or even better, I'm like, oh, I don't know them, but I've been looking for an excuse to introduce myself. So you're my excuse. So here we go. And I've really enjoyed that, the space is so small, like I said, that room of 200 people could paralyze Bitcoin if we lost all of them. But the upside of that is, it hasn't taken that long. Like if you go to enough conferences and you are willing to have enough conversations, like you start meeting like the builders in the space, like, or the podcasters, the, company leaders, whatever it is. And so I love that, like I'm not going to say I'm like at all a super important person in the space, but like I now know a ton of people. I know a ton of the builders, and a lot of them at least, know me or recognize me. And so I love that I can be that facilitator or that glue person to like bring people together. Or they'll be describing like, oh, I'm working on this project, but there's a problem I don't know how to solve. I'm like, oh, well, have you asked, him or her over here? Like that's kind of their area. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. Right. So you just bring them together. It's really cool that the ecosystem is so small that like it's, within the course of a year, if you go to enough conferences, like you can meet, it feels like you can meet everyone.
It feels like family. I've started going to conferences just last year in October, and I've been to, I don't know, like 10, 8, I don't know, like something like that. And you meet the same people all over again, and it's like, oh yeah, I know you. Like it's like family get-togethers, and I do enjoy them a lot. Like it's great, but we should make sure that we're not all at the same conference to not get nuked out.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, like for me, the first time I meet someone, it's that kind of like, okay, slightly awkward, whatever, and then it always takes like not even the second time, it's only the third time that I run into someone that I really start to feel more like familiar and comfortable and all of that. And now at this point, I love that like there's a long list of people that if I see them in a room, I just go up and I give them a hug, and like it's so great. Like you said, it's like family. Whereas, 4 conferences ago, I was just like shaking their hand saying, hi, my name is Keith. and now a couple conferences later, I'm like, hey, what's up? Big hug.
I guess we now have our second one. I look forward to the third one.
Yeah. And so when I see you in person the next time, just make sure there's a chair around because you're too tall. It would be way too awkward to give you a big hug at my height and at your height. This is not a scene I want, to have happen. So I will stand on a chair first and then I'll give you a hug.
Yeah, it's like you are hugging my belly at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thanks.
We can avoid that. We have an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asks you the question, what inspires you most about Bitcoin?
Let's see, what can I say that we haven't covered? I feel like that's kind of been a recurring theme. I think just, I started by saying how bored I was in my career. And so it's not like what specific thing about Bitcoin gets me inspired. It's just the fact that I have something that like gets me excited and that makes my work feel valuable and useful. Instead of just trying to earn a paycheck. Like a normal day job, it's like it's half of your waking hours, right? Like it's ridiculous to spend 40 plus hours a week on something that you think is a waste of time just to be able to pay the bills. So very selfishly, I just, forget the benefits for the rest of the world, right? Like I just love that I give a damn about the work that I'm doing and that I think it has value.
I love that so much. Keith, I have a good feeling about that episode in two aspects. The one aspect, I know it will flop because we did not talk about when you can retire on Bitcoin and then the economics of Bitcoin. But the second one, I know the few people that do watch it, they will get a real nice long podcast episode out that inspires them and actually goes deeper. And it's, I enjoyed those a lot, and it always it breaks sometimes my heart when I see like, oh, which episodes do really good and which like don't, and there's only like a handful where I'm like, oh, like I really enjoyed that and it does really good. It's like it's a magical mix. But I hope the people that watched till now really enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. And thank you so much for your time. Before I let you go, where can people find you and ask you questions?
On Twitter at Keith Mukai. I'm trying to be more. I'm kind of hot and cold on Nostr, but I do have an NPub, and then hopping into the Seed Center Telegram group is the best way to learn more about the project and get to know the people involved. There's a link to the Telegram group through seedcenter.com.
Awesome. Then thank you so much, Keith, for being on and taking the time. Also, thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye.
This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.